everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me is my very good friend, Rachel Miller. Welcome to the show, Rachel.
Thank you, Desiree. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so pleased that you're finally on the show. I have been a little bit of a bug and kind of pestering Rachel to come on because I think that she's got so much wonderful information and knowledge that she can share with the listeners that I think is super beneficial. And so she has so graciously agreed to come on the show and share that information with us. Rachel is a clinical therapist, and you have, a couple of letters after your name. And so I'd like you to tell us what that means. So start off with, did you know you always wanted to get into social work and help people? Let's start there.
Okay. Well, first, I just want to take a step back for a minute because Desiree was saying about see this little bug in my ear, and Desiree and I often go on runs together. And so she's been talking about the evolution of her podcast and telling me about it and asking me. And she asked me quite some time last year, I think, when it first started. And I had recently listened to her podcast when she was talking about her evolution and why she started. And she was talking about one of her friends that said, why me? And that was me. I was really nervous and not wanting to come on because I just felt like, well, who am I? What do I have to offer? And so she really inspired me, and she's inspiring a lot of people. So once again, I'm just thankful that she got me to come.
That's so sweet, Rachel. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Let's go ahead and jump in and share with us what it is that you do and how you're helping people.
Okay. So yes, I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I have a master's degree in social work and MSW, and I got that in 2003 from San Francisco State University. And it was a long, long journey to get where I am today. I worked in lots of different types of fields of social work. I work with children and kids with special needs, medical social work, which is what I do today. It's been quite the journey. I've had a lot of ups and downs in the process of getting here, and here I am.
Yeah. And so tell us what a clinical therapist does.
Yes. So there's different. So you can be a licensed clinical social worker and not do therapy at all. So you are licensed by the board. So I'm licensed by the Board of Behavioral Health and Sciences, and I had to accumulate a whole bunch of hours, and then I had to take 2 big exams, and that was a huge process. And with all that, I was getting married and having children. And so being a social worker, you can have your MSW, Master's in Social Work. You don't have to get licensed at all. But if you want to do counseling later on down the line, it might be a good idea. And also some people that hire you prefer you to be licensed. They just like the added education that you've gone through and, clinical and all the things that you did to get licensed. And so I actually took the step of starting my own practice. This was something that I thought about it a long, long time ago when I first got my degree. And I thought, oh, well, yeah, I'll probably do that later, when I'm older and wiser. And so I just felt like I didn't know what I could give as someone in their 20s and 30s. So a little bit older now and going through the pandemic, I saw a lot of people that needed, we were all suffering. And so a lot of people that were, having a lot of anxiety and depression, and a lot of the people that I was working with at my current job, I just started getting this pool of, hey, maybe this could work. And I talked to some of my wonderful friends, and they really helped guide me in the process. And so this started in 2021, and I started my business and went live in May of 2022.
Yep. And I remember you talking about it in the beginning about trying to decide if that's what you were going to do, if you were actually going to pursue it. And I was like, heck yes, you should do it. And I'm so glad that you have finally done it. And I know we were talking this morning, you're actually really adding more clients. And I think that it's great that you are available to help people and that you are gaining those clients. I think that and I spoke to Julie, who I had on the show a few weeks ago, and she was talking about, normalizing mental health care. And so I think that,
Absolutely.
having you there is available to people to reach out to get the care and the help that they need as we're processing through these last few years of some really challenging times, in addition to, regular life, right? So I think
Yeah.
it's just fantastic that you're doing this, and that you took the step to go that route when you could very easily have said, no, I'm going to just stick with my social working job at Kaiser, and that's good enough. And you didn't. You said, you know what, I see a need for more help, and you're doing it. And I love that so much.
Yeah, I mean, I really felt like I was being called. There was a need. How it really started was I started getting a ton of emails in my email box about a therapist, a telehealth, because of all the COVID. We've all been working from home, so I think more and more people were starting to get used to the idea of doing video visits and telemedicine. And so I started looking into it. And then the more I started looking into it and asking people, the more I thought, oh, okay, well, I guess this can be really doable and it's something that I can do. And so I really feel like right now is a really important time because we're just coming out of post pandemic and things that are going on in the world with the economy. So many people I know are suffering from anxiety and depression and just in an everyday fog, and it's really challenging.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit then about the types of therapy that you're trained in and some of the things that you do when you're working with clients. You had mentioned to me, and I'm going to hopefully get it right. It's EMDR therapy. Is
Yes.
that right?
Yes.
Okay. So tell us
So,
what that is.
thank you for asking. So, one of my specialties is kind of a mouthful and called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And it was developed by Francine Shapiro, and she was the main person that developed and did a lot of research. And basically, it talks about bilateral movement. So when we move our body and we're going kind of across our midline, when we do things like swimming or biking, running, we're doing bilateral movement. And so how I explain it to my clients in a very, very easy way without trying to get very technical into the brain is, I talk about when you go to sleep at night and you go into that REM deep sleep. And that is sometimes a way that we process things. I don't know if you've ever went to bed with a problem, or there's the old joke of like, oh yeah, I couldn't balance my checkbook, and somehow they figured it out like when they went to sleep and they woke up. So sometimes what's happening in our sleep during the REM processing is our brain is helping it go from kind of the maladaptive or the state of the mind where it's kind of conflict or we don't know. And our brain naturally wants to move into the adaptive network. And so what happens is EMDR is we're actually trying to do that in a conscious state. And so we're trying to do that where we do a lot of bilateral, and it's not just reprocessing. So a lot of people think, oh, I want to do EMDR and get right to the processing with the fingers, or I do a lot of butterfly tap on Zoom. And a lot of people think, oh, I just want to get to that. But there's a lot more that goes into it. And it's a lot of building tools. And so giving them resources, really about rewriting our script that we have. That's more of the maladaptive negative script that we have about ourselves, and rewriting the story, rewriting the script about a trauma or an event that happened in our life in a more adaptive way when we look at it. One of the things I wanted to say is when people think of, when I'm talking about trauma, people think, oh, well, I wouldn't want that type of therapy because, I haven't had any major trauma in my life. And so there's all sorts of trauma. They call it, big T and little t trauma. There could be someone was armed robbery or someone that went through a really bad attack or post-traumatic stress from the war, being a veteran. So there's all those are big, right? But there's also little things that get kind of stuck and stored and locked in our brain. For example, being made fun of at school. Maybe you stood up and you gave a speech and, the whole class laughed at you. And now you have a fear of talking in public. And so there's all sorts of things that people can come to therapy for EMDR. And I'm really passionate about it. I'm actually getting certified right now. So it's a process. So I went through the training and then you get consultation. And now I'm taking it a step further and getting certified. So what that means is I'm meeting within groups or an individual consultation. I'm bringing my cases and we're going over what I can do better, where I maybe missed the mark on something. And so, yeah, I'm excited.
That's excellent. Thank you for the explanation on that and kind of making it so that it was a little bit more easily digestible so that, we as lay people could understand what the process is for that and how that can help. And I love that you brought up the point about the big T and the little t, because I think so often we discount those things that happen to us that we think, oh, it's not that big a deal. But really, it kind of still is a big deal.
Yeah.
And especially if those things are still playing in your mind regularly or causing you to not be able to do something in your life because you're afraid, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds a little bit like the trainer gets trained at these sessions that you're working with now to get the certification, right? So you were saying that you go in with your cases and they kind of work with you. So the trainer's getting some training, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you could even take it a step further. I don't know how this will be in my future, but, they really encourage you to also become someone who does the consultation. So that I would be a trainer when I've gone through the whole process, that I could potentially help someone that's new and studying the EMDR and that I could help somebody after I've gone through the process.
So to this point in time, who have you mainly been working with in your social work?
Well, I have two jobs. I work part-time at Kaiser, and I'm actually in the middle of a job change. I'm going to be still working part-time, but I'm going to be getting out of the home a little bit. I have decided I want to get out of my yoga pants and maybe into some work clothes. And so lots of benefits from working from home. But I think for me, I need a little bit more kind of structure in my life. So I'm taking a job that's closer to home and I'm doing that part-time. And then I also see my clients. So I'm seeing mostly women. I have a few males in my practice as well, but I'm seeing mostly women from the ages of like 20 to late 50s.
Okay. And so are you seeing any particular types of things that they're coming to you for help with?
Absolutely. I think just again, post-pandemic, just a lot of anxiety. A lot of people recently lost their jobs. Or I think the pandemic was a time where we were in crisis. And so we were at home and a lot of us were isolated. We weren't able to see our family and friends. And so now people are coming out of that and trying to figure out, well, what was all that? What did it mean to me? And do I want to even go back to my job? I'm taking some time off right now, but maybe I want to do something different. And that's kind of what happened to me after the pandemic. It was just a time of I think really figuring out what was important in life and, who's important to us in our surroundings and what's important to me. What are my goals? What are my values? Do I want to, work a 9-to-5 job? Or do I want to do something different. I have a friend right now who's interested in doing pet photography, and I want to starting a business, and I just want to tell her, go for it. You can do this.
That's awesome. I love it. I absolutely agree. I think that we really did come out of that terrible experience of the pandemic. And I think for a lot of people, opened up their mind to what do I really want to do with my life, given everything that we just went through and the sadness of the people who did not make it. And, do I want to, like you said, work this 9-to-5 job where I maybe don't feel fulfilled, where it's not making me happy? And is this how I want to spend the rest of my life? And so I think that happened for a lot of people, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So some of the other things that I see is just, which I kind of wanted to touch on a little bit, is trying to learn how to take care of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a lot of people that are really struggling with self-care. How do I do self-care when I'm, working, or I'm a mom and I'm all over the place, or I'm pulled in all these different directions. And so I've been working a lot with self-care. What does that look like? Maybe I got to go exercise, or I got to go, spend 30 minutes doing this. And so I guess my takeaway is it doesn't have to be this long, huge, drawn out process of self-care. I think even just 2 minutes of just like taking a break if you're at work, or shutting down your computer, or just looking away from your screen, or maybe even talking to a coworker, just trying to practice a little bit of self-care and mindfulness, and just being able to kind of just be present and maybe have a cup of tea. So that could be self-care, playing with your dog. Mm-hmm. That's something that I enjoy doing a lot, is playing fetch with my dog. And so I got to get that in during the day.
Yeah, I think that that's a great point that you brought up. And when we hear self-care, we think like a day at the spa, right? So how am I going to fit that into my already busy schedule, right? Like I don't have time to take a whole day to go to the spa, or even, 2 hours, or whatever it's going to be. And like you pointed out, it doesn't have to be that long drawn out thing. Of course, that would be great if we can fit in going to the spa. Absolutely.
Yeah, that would be nice.
I know. But if you just even take, like you said, 2 minutes and have that mindfulness moment where you're taking those deep breaths, you maybe close your eyes, you're not looking at a screen, or even just get up out of your chair and walk outside for 2 minutes to breathe in some fresh air and get some vitamin D, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It doesn't have to be anything major, because I think one of the main things is time. Mm-hmm. So time management. And so if I, as a therapist, is trying to say, oh, okay, well, let's talk about self-care, and they're thinking like, oh, okay, well, I don't have time for all this stuff. I got to go take my daughter to soccer. So yeah, just adding a little bit in your day, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, step outside, look at the sun, take a walk around the block. If you're working, walk around the parking lot, you get up, stretch, move around.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk a little bit also about self-compassion, because I know that that's something that is so important. And it's very, very easy for us to just constantly be that self-talk of like, I'm not good enough, I'm not doing enough, look at what somebody else is doing and I can't compare to that. And we just are kind of beating ourselves up. And so if you would talk a little bit about how we can be a little bit more self-compassionate, or, if there's any suggestions or anything that you can share with us, that would be fantastic.
Okay, thank you for asking this wonderful question about self-compassion. So I've been learning a lot more about self-compassion and practicing it on myself. So it goes a lot with the type of therapy I'm doing with the EMDR, because what we're really trying to do is get out those negative scripts that we're saying to ourselves. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not strong enough. All these scripts that we have in our brain. And so self-compassion is basically just trying to be more mindful of how we're just being able to listen, maybe being a little bit more mindful of how we're talking to ourselves. A good example would be if you're going through something, or maybe you lost your job, or you're having a hard time getting a job and you're beating yourself up. you can think to yourself, like, well, what would I say to a friend? Would you beat your friend up and say, oh, well, it's because your resume sucks, or you're not cold calling enough people? Would you say that, Desiree? I mean, would you say that to your friend, or would you say something different?
Yeah, no, completely. I would totally be like, okay, you're just not good enough, right? You didn't go to the best college, and that's why you're not getting a job. No, of course not. Of course not.
So
Encouraging them to keep trying, and it's maybe just not, that job is not right for them, and just keep going for the next job or whatever.
Yeah. So that's what self-compassion is basically trying to tell ourselves, and kindly, just being kind to ourselves. Like, maybe it's just, if we're having a little bit of anxiety or self-doubt, maybe just putting your hands on your chest and just giving yourself some self-touch, touching your face a little bit. It may sound silly, but giving yourself an embrace, because what happens is when we have all this negative talk and we're talking all this negative stuff to ourselves, we're getting into that cortisol level. So then that's what's getting us more anxious, and we're getting into that fight or flight. And so what happens if we talk to ourselves gently and nicely, then we're getting more of that oxytocin, and we're bringing in that self-love. It might be, of course, easily said than done, but just kind of some simple awareness of just kind of sitting quietly, grounding yourself. A lot of times it's good to just sit and put your feet on the ground and notice how your feet are feeling on the ground. If you're sitting on the chair, notice your weight of your body on the chair. What does it feel like? Straightening up your back, noticing the chair behind you, and just kind of taking a notice of how you're feeling.
Yeah. So speaking about that grounding and the grounding techniques, you just mentioned some, but I know that there are some other things that you can do, like if you are experiencing panic, anxiety, and it's something to do with seeing something, hearing something, touching something. And so tell us about that. What is all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's actually a really great technique. You can try, if you're feeling anxious, try and just notice how you're feeling. Like I said, just put your hands on your chest. You can take a breath. And a lot of people think it's like, oh, deep breath. And I've said that to my kids so many times, like, oh, they're upset. Okay, take a deep breath, or, but it's just noticing your breath and breathing out, just noticing how your chest is rising and falling. And so once you kind of come into your body, you're acknowledging your body, and then you can come into your environment. So you can say this to yourself: what are 5 things that I could see in my environment? Right now, I'm sitting in my office space, in my room, and I see my dog, who has still been behaving and being very quiet. I see my water glass. I see some candles and light and some blankets, and so it's just really bringing your awareness, getting out of your head, right? So just getting out of all this jumbled stuff that's going on in our brain, and bringing it back to what's happening right this minute. And then you can say, what are 4 things that you can hear? So, if you're sitting outside, can you hear the gardener? Can you hear someone? If you live by a school, do you hear kids laughing? Do you hear a car going by? So it's just, again, bringing your awareness. Can you hear the wind? Can you hear a dog barking? So that is, again, another thing for centering, grounding. And then you can even do, what are some things that you can smell? Like 3 things you could smell, 2 things you can taste. If you had your morning coffee, take a sip of your coffee. And so just kind of little techniques that we can do to just bring us back awareness, just being mindful and present. There's so much time where if we're in distress, we don't have the tools, we don't know what to do. And so just something simple as putting your feet on the ground and just noticing what's around you.
That's great. I love that you pointed out that when those thoughts are jumbling around in your head, because I think that's what happens, right? And it sort of escalates if you continue to stay in that mindset where these things are just running around in your head. But by using these techniques that you've just described, it's like you come back, as you said, you get out of your head and you come back to right now, this moment in space, in time. And
that's right.
you just like cut off all of those racing thoughts or jumbled thoughts to what is happening right now. I think those are such a great way to release that anxiety and that stress and just bring yourself down. And I love it. So thank you for kind of talking us through all of how you would do those steps.
You're welcome. And one thing to make note of, so it's, people might think, oh, it's like a kind of a distraction technique, or you feel more relaxed. And that could be that. If that happens, then that's great. But it's really more about just being kind of aware of what's happening, or just trying to move away from the thoughts that are trying to overcome us, but not like saying, okay, well, I'm just going to distract myself, because then that's different, right?
And sometimes the things that we choose to distract ourselves end up adding on to the things that we're thinking about that maybe aren't helpful, right? You maybe get on social media, which then, now you've got all of the comparisons and whatever else that, might start to come into play. So let's talk a little bit about, because you mentioned before about self-compassion and about how you can do like a gentle embrace and, you're touching your face and things like that, that also help as grounding. But you were going to have me try some techniques, I believe. So what was it that you wanted me to try?
Well, that was one of them. I was going to have you try the 5 things you can see, 4 things. We can try and do some others as well. But
so obviously, if you're listening to this in your car, don't try this right now. Wait until you get somewhere parked safely and you can sit quietly and try these steps. But if you have the space and time available while you're listening to this, feel free to try it. So to start, what would you do?
One of the things in EMDR is, so when I talked about, it's not just about movement processing and doing the bilateral movement. A lot of it is about using the tools. So the tools are basically helpful. We really want to try and help people, because when they're going through a difficult time and maybe they're coming to counseling and then they want to do some, getting really into the why they're there. What happens is when you're talking about your life, it can bring up a lot of things. And so maybe after therapy, you might go home and your brain might, again, kind of start going. And we try to give some simple techniques. One is called creating calm and peaceful place. So it's really kind of like a guided imagery where you can do it. And so what I do is I have clients, and I'll do this with you. So I'll have you in your mind kind of pick a peaceful place. Sometimes people use the word safe place. I try to stay away from the word safe, as it can resonate a lot with people. I try to a peaceful place. It could be something that you have been to before. It can be a place that you've seen in a movie, a place you ran to. And once you have this place in your mind, let me know.
I do.
Okay. So what is the place?
It was actually inspired by the tapestry behind you with the sunflowers. So I imagined a beautiful field of sunflowers and with the sun shining on them.
That sounds really beautiful. So I'm going to ask you to go a little bit deeper. So talking about, again, what more do you see? What do you smell? Can you hear anything? So any other images that are coming into your mind?
Yeah, I can see them swaying in the breeze, and I see the leaves kind of fluttering in the breeze, and maybe some, as you often see, like the little things floating in the sky when there's a breeze. So I'm seeing that as well.
Okay, it sounds wonderful. So what I'd like you to do right now is just to really go to that place. You can close your eyes or leave it open, and just imagine yourself in the center of that field with the sunflowers. Is it sunrise, sunset? What time of day is it?
I would say it's actually not quite sunrise, a little bit past sunrise, so that the sun is a little bit higher up in the sky, but not like noon.
Okay. So it's still like a nice feeling in the air, a nice crisp, chill. Not cold, but okay. Yeah. So what we're trying to do is create a place where maybe you can think in your mind, I don't know, today or earlier in the week, where you maybe had a mild disturbance.
Mm.
and something that was kind of, it has to be really mild, nothing major. So a mild disturbance of something that was, kind of bothering you.
Okay. I have something in my mind. Should I
Oh,
describe it or
okay.
just?
Yes, yes. Just what was it? Yeah.
Okay. So, as I had shared with you this morning, my doggy had some stomach issues. And so he has been having some trouble the last couple of days, not feeling well. And so that's been really troubling for me.
Okay. Yes, I remember you said that. So what I'd like you to do right now is just to think, what would it be like knowing that I can take this little break? Maybe I'm feeling stressed out about my dog and his being sick, or I have to clean up this throw up now. And so what would it feel like if you were to just kind of take a break and go to this field of sunflowers?
Would feel fantastic.
Maybe it's like, again, those thoughts that are coming up, or okay, if you're feeling like I'm just going to sit and I'm going to just take a little break and think about what would it be like to just take a break for a minute and just really go into that field. You could imagine maybe it's after you clicked up the throw up, or maybe it's like you just need a break because you need to get yourself that energy, get going so you can clean up the throw up.
Yeah.
So just take a minute and just really think about what it would be like to just have a mental break from that thinking, is my doggy sick? Is he okay? You have to take him to the vet again, and go to your field. And what are you noticing right now?
Well, I immediately noticed that my breathing slows down, and I definitely feel more joy because they're beautiful sunflowers and I enjoy being in nature, and the sun, I enjoy feeling the sun. So I definitely feel more joy and calmer.
Okay, well, that's wonderful. So what I do with my clients is I try to enhance that with a little bit of bilateral movement. So I usually give them a few things that they want to try. So sometimes people really like this butterfly tap. I have lots of clients that we do it really slow because we're doing more of an enhancing the feeling. So you can try a butterfly tap, or you can try and just tap on your knees. And so what I would have you do is think again about the mild disturbance and really try and like take a break and go to your field. What would your field name be?
Well, just off the top of my head, it would be easy to say it's the sunflower field.
Yes. Yes. So I like to have the clients have a name because it's basically cueing the brain. So you're saying sunflower field, right? And then you kind of like, well, once you start doing it, then you might automatically start taking that. I feel calm, or I'm feeling relaxed. And so once you start feeling that, then you can do some bilateral tapping to enhance butterfly tap. You can tap your legs. And so what I ask people to do is to really try and do this throughout the day. So maybe there's a future thing that's going on, but I want it to, again, I always stress mild disturbance, because the more you do this, the easier it will be. And then you can start doing it for more stressful things.
Right.
So when we are talking about some of the processing of the things that you're going through in your life, then we can say, okay, in a session, things might be coming up. And so this is just one of the tools, or after the session's over, we want them to practice. And so what we're really trying to do is help them stay within their window of tolerance. And so that's a word I've been learning a lot about in therapy, is window of tolerance. Is because if we're doing stuff in therapy and we're talking and we're processing, and somebody's getting really upset or crying or distraught, we want to check in and see what's going on. Do we need to go to our calm place right now? So that's just one of the resources. And so we kind of did a little bit, but if we had more time, I'd have you continue thinking of other disturbances, going to your sunflower field, and you can try this, really see if it helps. I'm not saying you have to sit for 5 minutes. I mean, you could just take it for 2 minutes, sunflower field, going in, and just see if your body has a reaction, And I say to clients, if anything negative comes in, stop the tapping. Don't, because this is a positive enhancing exercise. And so people might say, oh yeah, this other thought's kind of popping in, and let's stop the exercise and we'll come back to it.
Yeah, it sounds like you don't necessarily want to have any kind of negative association with something that's supposed to be calming, a calming exercise and helping you through a process of working on like the little T kind of things that we talked about earlier. And I love how you said that you start with these small things. And as you build and develop this skill, then start working on some of the larger disturbances, or as you work toward some of those big T kind of things. But you've got to get that skill kind of built up, right?
Yeah, and so a lot of the first several therapy sessions is giving the client a lot of tools so they can actually go home or right after the session have something that they can do. And some people try it and they like it. Some people are like, it didn't really work for me, so we'll try something and we'll go on until we can find something that works.
Yeah, that's excellent. And thank you for taking the time to go through that process with me. And I absolutely am going to be using that for my little
Awesome.
disturbances going forward. Rachel, I wanted to go back to something that we talked about earlier, and that was the negative scripts that you mentioned that could be running through your mind. And I know this happens for me when I get into comparison mode. So what is the way that you kind of stop those scripts from running or cut it off so that you're not stuck in that for like an hour?
Yeah, that's a great question. The scripts, those are the things that when we practice our mindfulness. So once again, going back to kind of the sitting, where are we sitting? What are we noticing? Those are what's passing in our mind, right? So I had a script coming on to the show. I listened to a lot of the podcasts, and it's like, oh, well, what do I have to offer? Am I, interesting enough? Am I smart enough to be on this podcast? And so we all have these things. And so the goal is to not get hooked. It's not to get fused or hooked with the negative script. And so what we need to do is we need to practice some unhooking techniques. And that's kind of the coming back to your body. What am I noticing? And so the thoughts are going to be there. Our mind is just, it's going places, right? So what we need to know is we don't need to believe the thought. That it's just a thought. It's like, you can use it as leaves in a pond, or leaves are going by in a pond, and I'm just watching the thought float by. If there's something I want to take notice of, or it's something good thought, then sure, bring it on in. But if it's some of those negative things, then just like let them float on by. And that's when we need to like unhook ourselves. And so those are some of those mindfulness techniques. Being mindful, like I said, throughout your day, just noticing when it's pouring a cup of coffee, looking at the coffee go into the cup with the cream, having that first taste. The thoughts and the negative scripts, I mean, those are the things that we just need to know that they're going to be there, and it's how to get unhooked from them is the process.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And I love that you were talking about pouring the coffee and then watching the cream go in. And I am just now picturing like a television commercial where you see those creamer, it changes the color of the coffee. And I love that, because then you take a sip and you're like, and that's that mindfulness, right? Because you are in the moment enjoying that cup of coffee, that first sip of coffee,
right.
and you're in the moment.
Right.
I do want to kind of conclude our talk right now. If you could suggest any kind of books or podcasts or anything that you think would be beneficial to the listeners related to these things that we've been talking about now, or anything that you think even would be helpful, and share those with us now, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So I got this wonderful book. It's called Tapping In. It really has wonderful techniques. It's by Laura Parnell. She has step-by-step guides. There's actually a lot of scripts in here, and I use this book a lot with my clients. There's a lot of tapping in your safe, peaceful place is what I just actually turn to. She does a lot where she's you can bring in people in your mind and there's a whole script of tapping in protectors and spiritual people and people from your past, your ancestors, or someone from a movie. With kids, you can work on them from a superhero and bring them in when they're having anxiety or stress. And so this book is helpful for clinicians and also for people that want to learn more about what tapping is. There's different types of tapping, but tapping in itself is just to be a little slow tapping, can be relaxing. I had one more book. This book is Man's Search for Meaning. And yes, I think a lot of people are aware of this book. So yes, this book is very powerful and really just talks about like when we're going through pain and suffering, noticing the little things. He talks a lot about when in the concentration camp, what was he kind of hold on to that was able to make him survive. He actually is a psychiatrist, and so he helped a lot of people in the concentration camp, and it was very inspiring to read. And so, yeah, this book, I think if people are going through a real hard time, it can be deep, so you might want to read it at the right time of your life.
Yeah, that is a very powerful book, and you have to kind of be in the right space, I think. It's fantastic work. An excellent book. Yeah, for sure. So thank you for those recommendations. I will, of course, include the titles and author and everything in the show notes. Anybody that would like to check those out. Thank you for those, Rachel. I appreciate it. And is there any podcasts that you like to listen to or anything else that you'd like to suggest that the listeners check out?
So I spend a lot of time listening to a lot of therapy podcasts. I don't really have anything in particular. I kind of just do a lot of research. I've been listening to your podcast a lot lately, but I do listen to this other podcast that's EMDR related, and that's called Notice That. And I get a lot of my kind of inspiration from that podcast.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you for suggesting that, because I think if there's people who are listening and, curious about what EMDR is and how it works, and they can get a little bit more information from a podcast like that. Well, lastly, Rachel, what I'd like to do is find out if people have questions, things that we talked about that they would like to learn a little bit more about, or if they just need somebody to talk to, how would they reach out to you and connect with you?
Thank you. So the best way is through email, and it's Rachel, Rachel Miller, LCSW. Other thing, people can find me on, I don't have a website yet. That will be my goal for 2023, to get a website up and running. But people can find me on Psychology Today, City of Morgan Hill.
Okay. And of course, I'll include that information in the show notes as well, to make it easy reference for people. Thank you again, Rachel, for being on the show. I so appreciate you, and the information that you've shared, I think, is so critical for all of us during this time as we're kind of coming back to life in a way, after dealing with the pandemic for these last few years, and just even with the daily life of things that are going on. I think these are such great skills that you've shared with us. So thank you again for being with us. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.